Saturday afternoon at 1:30. I've just taken a shower, so please excuse the fact that my hair is not done. But whatever, I want to film this clip, and I finished another book last night, so yay me. This book is The Wonderful Adventures of Mrs. Seacole in Many Lands by Mary Seacole, and it is a Victorian autobiography. Mary Seacole was a Black Jamaican lady who was born in 1805, and her mom was a nurse to some of the British soldiers nearby where they lived in Kingston. And so when the Crimean War broke out in the mid-1800s, 1850s, Mary Seacole determined that she would take her own nursing skills and volunteer to join Florence Nightingale in the Crimea and help nurse the soldiers over there. Previously to that, she had worked in Panama and some other areas around the Caribbean, basically being a healing woman. She never was formally trained, but she learned from her mom and along the way how to treat things like cholera and other diseases of the time, and how to just provide care to people who were ill and needed comfort. But she was not allowed to join the official nursing team that went to the Crimea, probably because she was Black. She was born of a Creole mom and a Scottish dad in Jamaica. So we're hearing all of this from Mary Seacole's own, point of view, because it is her autobiography. She wrote it herself. And it's very, very interesting. It's not the best in terms of the writing. And Mary Seacole is a little prone to blow her own horn. But honestly, if she doesn't, who else is going to, right? Like, nobody's going to pat this woman on the back. And she does include various testimonials from military guys and officers and regular soldiers and sailors who she treated and who really appreciated the work that she did. And she was not afraid to put herself in harm's way to help provide comfort for people. So she was a very, very interesting character. Not only was she a person who, provided healing services to others, she also had a business. And that was what she ended up doing in the Crimea. She set up basically this hotel type thing where people could come, and you didn't spend the night, but there was like a restaurant. She would provide lunches, or she would put together meals for people, provide other goods that people wanted. So she was basically a store in the Crimea and providing, essential goods and services. And she bankrupted herself to do this. And ended up at the end of the Crimean War being destitute and having to apply to some of the folks who she had helped during different periods to help her. And they did put together a fund to provide for her in her old age. So very interesting story. You don't get to hear, she doesn't go into any of her own personal life. And she doesn't go into the relations that she had with Florence Nightingale, which I guess were quite controversial. In the years after her autobiography was published, there was some question as to the truthfulness of the things that Mary Seacole had written about and all of that. And, I just don't think there's any need for, rivalry between Florence Nightingale and Mary Seacole. Like, they both were providing essential services. They both filled a niche in the Crimean and a necessary position that was needed. So there really was no need for that sort of rivalry to be hyped up. But, again, I don't think it was between the two of them. I think it was others. And some people feel like by shining a light on Mary Seacole, we're diminishing a light on Florence Nightingale, which I don't think is true either. Like, both women are obviously quite heroic in their own ways, and were doing very essential work that they didn't get enough credit for. And so we should be celebrating both Florence Nightingale and Mary Seacole. Like, there's no need for one or the other. Anyway, I'm really glad that I decided to read this book. I know it was going around BookTube. It was the pick for the Read Around the World book club that's hosted by Mel. And I think it's a wonderful story. I am so glad that I read it. I had no idea. I'd never read anything about Mary Seacole, and I learned a ton about the Crimean War, which I also knew nothing about. I didn't even know where Crimea was. I had to Google a map so I could figure out where they were located while this autobiography was, taking place. So that was super interesting, and I really enjoyed what I learned from this book. So yeah, so it's Saturday afternoon, as I said, and I'm hopeful that I'm going to finish at least 2 more books by the end of the day tomorrow, hopefully 3. So stay tuned. Hey there, it is Saturday night, and I just wanted to pop on here and let you know that I've finished another book, and it's Duranda by George Eliot. I've been buddy reading this all month of October with Britta, and it was my big book for Victober, and yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I wasn't sure at the beginning because the first, 100 pages or something is not about anybody named Daniel Deronda. We see Daniel Deronda for just a brief minute in the opening chapter of the story, and then the first 80 pages or something is all about a different character named Gwendolyn, a young woman who all of a sudden finds herself in the situation of her family's being without money, and so her prospects of a life in the aristocracy doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So we follow her for the first, like I said, 80 or 100 pages of the book. And so it was why is this book named Daniel Duranda? But it becomes clear that Daniel Duranda is in fact the linchpin that holds this story together. And I don't really want to talk very much about the plot of the story because I went in knowing nothing about what this story was about. And I think that's the best way to approach it, because everything is slowly revealed, because again, George Eliot is writing this book back in the 1800s. It was a serialized novel. And so of course things get told slowly over time in publication in periodicals, and that's the way the story is meant to be told. And so I think part of the fun of a Victorian novel is that slow unfolding of the story. And if you don't know anything about the synopsis of the plot or the characters, then you're kind of just left with that question all the time of why is this in here like this? And why is the story being told this way? So I'm just going to leave the plot alone and not talk about that. I will say that this book brought up a lot of really interesting conversation between Britta and I about, choices that people make in life, and also about how women are treated and how women are expected to behave, and how ethics and morality are different for women than they are for men, at least in that time period. And even today, really, women are expected to behave a certain way and make certain choices. And if they don't, then there's a question of them being bad people, right? So those questions all come into play in this novel, as well as questions of how Jewish people are treated in society, and all of that. So I think there's a lot that's going on sort of underneath the story, big questions about what's right and wrong, the kind of choices people are forced to make, how family stands up for each other or doesn't stand up for each other, all those sorts of big questions. And I think George Eliot is just a master at that sort of storytelling. She really is layering her stories with a lot of questions, big questions, big life questions that, really provide the reader with a lot of stuff to chew on, and I really enjoy that about her novels. And there's just something just so cozy. Brett and I both remarked upon the fact that it's just so cozy to read Victorian literature in the fall, and especially George Eliot. Really enjoy that sort of slowing down, slowing the pace of the story, and just sort of sinking into something that's really long, and you just know that it's going to take you along and carry you along, and you're just going to enjoy yourself. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased to have read Daniel Duranda in October. It was excellent. It's Sunday morning, and I finished another book last night. Another book that I've been working on this whole month. It's been a buddy read with Sean, the book maniac. It is Invisible North: The Search for Answers on a Troubled Reserve by Alexandra Shimo. And this was a memoir, investigative, sort of a mix of memoir and investigative reporting. So Alexandra Shimo goes up to northern Canada to a indigenous community up there called Saskatchewan, and to investigate a story that happened back in 2005. It's like 2011 when she goes to visit this reserve. And the story that she's investigating is an incident of E. coli in the water supply, and that E. coli contamination causing a lot of illness and sickness within the community. So she actually gets permission to move onto the reserve. She gets space in a very crowded, as all the homes are on the reserve, very crowded. She gets some living space with another woman, and she lives there for several months. And in the process of living there, learns what it is like to live in that community, and all of the issues that community faces, from, like I said, overcrowding in the housing, contaminated water, lots of illness that comes from being forced to live very close together, all that sort of stuff, humongous high incidence of suicide and self-harm and other types of illnesses like that, also alcoholism and drug abuse, and just like every social problem that you can imagine, like ramped up to 1,000. And so she's living on this reserve, and she's trying to get answers to this E. coli outbreak and what happened and what steps were taken when that incidents happen. And she's sort of getting the runaround. And I think that this memoir was done very, very well. It first of all, it shines a light on the just horrible living conditions that this indigenous community is forced to live within, and the fact that they were moved to this floodplain area that floods every year against their wishes and their express statements of knowledge, that they knew that this was a swampy area, that it was going to flood every year, that because they were familiar with the whole territory, they knew that this was an inappropriate place to try to build a community, but the federal government of Canada did not listen to them and forced them all to live there anyway, and then stopped providing help. And it's very well documented that the federal government has not met their obligations, their trust obligations to this indigenous community. And so Shimo does an excellent job of shining the light on that issue, even though she is not an indigenous person herself. She's a settler person, and but the way that she tells the story is really, really well done, because at the beginning of the book, I was quite irritated with her, and some of her choices I felt were very questionable, and kind of inserting herself into the narrative a little bit more than I perhaps would have liked. But by the end of the book, and I don't want to spoil anything about it, even though it is nonfiction, but I think it's best to go in without really knowing how it ends. But I think the way that she tells the story really demonstrates the fact that it's not because these people are indigenous that they're facing all of these problems, these social issues. It's the fact of being stuffed into this place that's inhospitable to humans to live, and then nobody paying any attention or giving them any help or assistance, and in fact working against the things that they try to do themselves to better their lives, that causes on the other side these social problems. And the way that she writes this book, I cannot express enough how well she brings that to light, and the fact that, you know, anybody who was put in that position and put in that living situation would end up with issues. So I know I'm sort of talking around and not being very specific, but that's because I want you to read the book and not have me tell you about the book. I want you to read the book and experience it for yourself, because I think that it would give you a much broader understanding of what Indigenous communities go through, especially in Canada, because Canada has a different system for how they work with Indigenous, or don't work with, as the case may be, Indigenous tribes. So yeah, Invisible North, excellent piece of nonfiction about Indigenous community in Northern Canada, almost in the Arctic Circle, and the terrible living conditions that they are forced to endure. And we should not look away from these things. We should not bury our head in the sand and not be wide awake and aware of what is going on in these communities. So I'm very glad that Sean and I read that book together. I feel like it really broadened my perspective, and I learned a lot from it. So yeah, that one was excellent. So today is Sunday, as I said. It's Sunday morning. I just got back from grocery shopping, and I have one more book that I want to complete today, and that is my Book Naturalist book. I don't have it right here with me, but I will keep you posted to see, can Heidi finish all the things she needed to finish by the end of October. I have a few more hours. Can I do it? We'll see. How dangerous human-made goods are. The Mcflurry Hedgehog, for example, is a hedgehog that met its demise when its head got stuck in the hole in the top of a plastic McFlurry soft-serve ice cream cup, and is mounted precisely in that undignified position. It is just one of many similar hedgehog victims of this popular fast food dessert. As the accompanying card explains, searching for leftover ice cream, the hedgehogs would get their heads in through the wide opening in the lids, but their spines stopped them from pulling it out again. They would die from starvation or blindly walk into water and drown. Oh, isn't that awful? God, think of that, people, when you buy McFlurries. I did it. I finished the last book that was on my list that had already started, that I meant to finish. Darwin Comes to Town, How the Urban Jungle Drives Evolution by Menno, Schilthuizen. And it was excellent. It was so good. I'm not going to talk about it too much here, because I will be doing a separate review of it for the Book Naturalist Book Club. But this was our pick for the month of October, and it was fabulous. All about different species that have adapted to living in an urban environment, who have used a connection with either the urban landscape or with humans to find a new niche for themselves. And it was so excellently and engagingly written. Really enjoyed it. Lots of tabs, lots of things to talk about, which I will do in my review. So it is October 31st. I have completed everything that I had already started this month that I wanted to get through. So it was a good push for this last week of the month to get through everything. And I'm really quite pleased with myself. So thank you for coming along with me for this vlog. And I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read. I'll talk to you later.